Over the last 11 years, my brother Ben has been working extremely hard on building his property portfolio in the hope to set himself up for financial freedom in the future, to have more choices, to support his family, and to help other people achieve their dreams as well. Now, from going to 0 properties to a multi-million-dollar portfolio by the age of 32 has been a feat in itself, but certainly hasn't come without its hard work and sacrifices. So today's video, we're going to interview Ben and learn a little bit more about his journey. Now, I know 11 years ago seems like a distant memory to you these days, but where did it all begin back when you were 24 years of age?
Yeah, man, like I remember I was 23 at uni, and the first book that I picked up was John McGrath's book. And it was a book about investing. I'd never really heard anything about property investing before, coming in completely green. And I read his book about how he went from absolutely nothing to building a multi-million-dollar property portfolio and obviously a business empire. And I was kind of like, this is super interesting. Like, what else is there to read? Went to the library at uni and found Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And I remember like so well, I'd just met my wife, who then was my girlfriend, and we went to a really good friend of hers, like pool party. I was just so into this book. Everyone else is getting drunk, which at that age I normally would have been doing as well. And I'm just sitting by the pool. I couldn't put it down. It was the first time I'd met some of her friends, and they're like, he's the most antisocial asshole of all time. And I'm just like, this is like it. I've been looking for a strategy to achieve financial freedom, to not work for the next 50 years as long as I could imagine. And I've finally found it. It just completely resonated with me.
That's so funny, man. If I had been at that pool party, I would have thrown you in the pool and ripped your book up at that age as well. But from there, what happened after kind of understanding property investing a little bit more from those couple of books?
You know, the first thing that I did was recognize that I had a year and a half of uni still to go. And at that time I was on Centrelink, I was living out of home, and I was literally cleaning rooms and pouring drinks on Friday, Saturday nights and
the uni
during
grind.
the days. Yeah, I was doing it, man. And I had about minus $50 a week left over, which my best mate, Josh, I'd be sneaking into his room, eating all his protein, using his hair product and his spray. I'd be borrowing $50 every single week and then paying him back the next week. But what I did decide to do is I found out at uni that you could actually go, instead of doing a subject, a work placement. And so I went, well, what do I need to fast track my income? I need experience by the time I finish uni. So I went and did 4 internships. I organised like this World Environment Day festival on the coast, which was cool. Went and worked with the Queensland state government, went and also worked with Oxfam, and went and worked with the local council. And I realised, as well as Parsons Brickenhoff, one of the biggest engineering companies in the world. And what I realised really, really, really quickly is that I was as capable as many of the people in there before I'd finished uni. And so I spent my time doing that. And then I got to this point where I'm like, it's time to start making money now. I was ready to move back to Sydney and go hard at it. And this actually caused a heap of conflict with me and Lise, because she still had another year of study on the coast. So I went and worked for an up and coming startup and ended up earning like way more money than I would have in a graduate year that year. I also was like really entrepreneurial and did some consulting for the state government and the local council around sustainability, which was my absolute passion at that time. And then I got the call up from IBM to go into their graduate program, and we moved back to Sydney.
So coming back to Sydney and living that corporate life at the time and reconnecting with all of your mates down here that had obviously found a little bit of success in their lives as well, what did you guys end up doing once you got back?
So that first year in Sydney, I was able to start saving some money. I'd moved back into mum and dad's houses and everything was going okay. And my mates and I decided, my 2 best mates and I decided to go buy a place. Now, we needed something cheap because that's all we could afford. And we went for a 2-bedroom unit, unrenovated, in the biggest shithole of Miranda. It was a full-blown drug den. But I didn't realise, like, at the time, because I'd been living in such average accommodation during uni. And so we bought it, and then what mum and dad said to me was, look, we were going to give you $10,000 to your first property, And I'm like, well, I've already bought my first. Can I take it for the second? And Dad's like, that's not how this works. And I'm like, well, you know, can I please have it for the second one? And he's like, all right. And so that got us on a journey. And that was the first time I really started to think about investing properly. I bought the Residex reports, which used to be insane. They used to predict the best up and coming suburbs over the next 5 to 7 years. And I bought that report. I identified 60 suburbs, and then my mate Macra and I drove literally to Wollongong, Central Coast, Northern New South Wales. Every single weekend we were doing that for 6 months. We found this suburb called San Remo, which was later in the Daily Telegraph called Is San Remo the Africa of Australia? It was that big a dive.
Wow.
And we bought a 5-bedroom house with a granny flat on it that was renting for $600 a week for $213K.
Wow, that's just crazy, hey. And all in the while, I believe that first property was 2008, right?
2011.
2011, sorry. So this was pre you finding out about global cycles, the 18.6-year real estate cycle and things like that. So, you know, how fortunate was it for you, and how much did that actually impact this journey to building your portfolio by just investing in Sydney and the Central Coast in 2011?
You know, I honestly feel like such an asshole now because I didn't even know that there was a GFC. Because I was on government housing and working at like Noodle Box and the Wharf and Fridays and cleaning beds on the sunny coast. Like, I didn't know. Like, my roommates were all older. They were all earning money, and they were all like buying every single dollar of American currency they could and buying all their investment properties and stuff. And I was just oblivious. I was just, let's train, let's surf. What are you guys up to? I don't have any money. So I'm one of those people that if I can't do it, I don't lose a moment of sleep to think about like what I could be doing. And even then I'm like, I know I'll be in. So yeah, like I've got to that point, bought my first 2 properties, and that's when the passion started. I'm like, I've found what I'm supposed to be doing. Like my mates and I went up to San Remo for 3 days. I completely hand painted the inside and outside of the house myself in like 3 days. We were just on the beers for 3 days, like not sleeping. And it was just like fun. And I was like, man, investing's simple. We're getting all this cash flow. Then I get a knock on the door from the council going, we know what you guys are doing. And I didn't know that you couldn't rent upstairs, downstairs in a granny flat with separate families in that area of Sydney. And they're like, we want you to turn it back to a normal house. And that was the first like, oh shit, I don't know what I don't know. There's things that I need to be smarter about in the future. And, you know, my mortgage brokers and solicitors at that time weren't the best, and they weren't giving me the advice of what I needed to go out and look at that I wasn't looking at the time.
You know, thank God you had those experiences at an early stage of your portfolio, because, you know, it shows you those little red flags, and it kind of gives you a kick up the arse to say, you know, property investing isn't just about going out there and buying properties or buying a Residex report, picking a suburb and purchasing a property. There is a lot more that goes into it to make sure that you're avoiding those red flags, and, you know, you're obviously maintaining the property well and looking after your tenants and everything like that.
I had to learn that lesson a lot later, bro.
But then, you know, we go from property 1 to property 2. Then where does property 3 come in? How long did it take you to get into that third one now?
Yeah, so at that point, I'm working down in Sydney, and then my wife at the time, my girlfriend Lisa's like, I hate it here. She's come from Queensland, chill lifestyle, friends and family everywhere, to like Sydney, and I said, well, let's go to Bali. So we flew to Bali for 2 weeks, and she's like, at the end of that trip when we got back, she's like, I'm leaving with or without you. What do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I want to be with you. And I really wasn't enjoying the corporate life already. Like, I was at the very bottom of the rung, which is cool. Like, I know that as the responsibility changes over time. But what I'd learned at IBM, again, after booking meetings with a lot of people there, was just that I was as capable. And I think, you know, I always had this like thing that I wasn't good enough growing up, and that I didn't deserve it, and then I had to outwork everyone. And when I got there, it was like, I've just got an entry to one of the biggest like major league players in the world, one of the most successful companies of all time, and I feel as good as everybody else in there. Like, I think my identity and ego at the time just needed that box ticked more than I needed to spend 5 years working there.
Yeah.
And so we came back to Queensland. I went back to the previous employer that I had in the year after uni. which was in sustainability and solar and much more in line with my values. And then I just got back on the train. I started to save. We bought a house just off the beach in the sunny coast for $310K. My boss at the time used to always laugh when he dropped me off. He's like, man, I'm just going to do a drive-by drop-off because it's so ghetto here at that time.
They called this part of the Sunshine Coast KSB, the Kiwana shit boxes.
Yeah. You know, now those places are worth $1 million and it's completely washed and it's absolutely beautiful and I regret selling it.
Yeah.
But where that went for me and Lisa is like I took a job to get from Sydney back to here. Was earning really good money, and then we found out we were pregnant with Summer, our first bub, and went from earning like legitimately $200K a year at like 26 to, okay, I need to retrain. I'm coming back to the coast and went to $45K a year. Lisa finds out she's pregnant, one income, $45K a year, 2 investments plus our own home we've just bought.
Far out.
I was literally at the point where I was like going to Bunnings on the weekend with like $50, buying a coat of paint, and it was the funnest time, bro. Like, we landscaped the home, we replaced the kitchen, I painted all the bathroom tiles, I hand painted with a good mate the roof of the joint, painted the outside of the house, got some like Balinese dude that I met to do all the rendering for me called Ollie. He was just a legend. He did the whole house for me for $600 cash.
What a legend.
Just such a ledge, helped me out. I got him back years later to do other houses and paid him like $15K for him because like he'd realised he was worth more and I realised what the market was worth too.
Yeah, good.
But we just had this ball. We fixed up the house and then I sold the place and used what I made on that place, which was like $70K or something, to go buy 2 more. And then I was like, okay, this is how I can do it faster. I can't save my way there quick enough to get where I want to be, but if I sell the right properties at the right time, you know what I mean? And I went on a rampage. And at that point, buying properties for me was more important than what I was buying. And that's when I came unstuck in a big way. I bought something inland from Byron at the wrong time of the cycle and got completely cleaned up. I lost like $40,000 in a year where I earned $70K.
Which at 26, 27 with a young kid and a limited income, it's hard.
It was brutal. Like, it was the biggest lesson that I've learned around, you know, doing your research properly, not trusting spruikers, not trusting people that you think have your best interests at heart, and really like learning fundamentals myself so that would never happen again. And I think about all these things that happened to me, like tenants trashing places, solicitors not doing their job, me not knowing the right questions to ask, having the wrong advisors, listening to spruikers, trying to speculate and make short-term money, which so many young guys fall into that trap. You know, to going from like driving around 14 properties a day, taking a photo, having the notes on a 1-page piece of paper and trying to figure it out at the end of the day, to building myself a 200-point checklist, taking 80 photos at a property, like just really, I just went OCD on it. And because it was my absolute passion, like financial freedom, choices, property, it just enabled me to like outwork everyone else. I was like putting in so much time at that point. And then I was working inside the industry and working with like 140 guys that were all 10 to 20 years older, that were all investors. And I met with every one of them and just picked their brain over 2 or 3 years. And that fast tracked my learning so far beyond where I was at the time.
Yeah, and I think that's important, you know, being observant in those earlier years and taking those experiences where you're just catching up with your colleagues at lunch or whatever and, you know, picking their brain. And, you know, I think we've talked about this before. We see that as hindsight. You know, you talk to all of these super successful people and there's a commonality between every single one of them, which is property investing. It kind of gives you that confirmation bias that you need to keep pushing forward. But with then being able to actually do that work and figure out those fundamentals and those key performance indicators that you can look for to identify the right markets, the right suburbs, the right properties, you've now built your team of advisors and you've got the right support where you can lean on these people. How much confidence did that give you moving forward once you were like, okay, I've got a blueprint here?
You know, that blueprint was beautiful. So what happened for me was I got to a point where I think I'd bought 7 to 9 properties in the hope of like the person with the most properties wins. That was legitimately like the mentality of people that started 10, 15 years ago, because the only books were like 0 to 130 properties in 3 years and become a real estate millionaire and all of that other bullshit that's out there. And I just thought more is better. And then what happened is I stumbled across Phil Anderson's stuff. We already had a good process for buying. I was just buying the wrong stuff at the wrong time in the wrong markets. And so what I decided to do was create a further framework. And once I started to learn about the longer term real estate cycle that's been running in America for 200 years, Europe for over 350 years, I started to put together data in a different way and create rules around, I only buy metro markets or the biggest regional ones. I buy 600 square meter blocks. I buy properties on quiet streets, close to transport, in places that have underperformed in the last 10 years but overperformed in the last 100 that people want to live at. And I started to build out this framework that enabled me to make better decisions, short-term, medium-term, and longer-term, because all of those things matter to me and they absolutely matter to our clients as well. And so I got to this point where I literally went from like, I don't know, 5 to 9 properties. I can't remember how many of them I'd sold and how many I was holding at that point. And I cleared the house. I sold everything down to 2 properties, and I went, I'm going to rebuild the best portfolio I can. And so I wanted cash flow, I wanted capital growth, I wanted tax benefits, and I wanted to time the cycle. And I brutally went after those properties in the 5 years after that up until this point. Replaced my portfolio with properties that will give me over 200 grand a year of passive income in the future when I pay them off. And I'm now proud of what I own again. Like, I've got the right stuff. Not all of it's where it will be in 15 years, but I've got the right stuff that will set me and my family up forever.
I love that so much, man. It's so inspiring to see, and just to know that, like, you know, that hard work, that consistency over a longer period of time can pay off. And I think that's helped myself and my sister, you know, get to where we are. I think it definitely helps all of our clients as well, just knowing that we walk the talk, right? We don't just tell people to do this stuff. We're doing it ourselves and constantly trying to learn, constantly trying to improve. But now, obviously, you've done a lot over the last decade. What's next for Ben?
For me, the next thing is sharing the lessons from buying 16 properties over 11 years with everybody else, plus the $300 million worth of property we've bought for over 1,000 clients now. So I just want to give back. Like, there's so many lessons that I've learned personally the hardest way. Like, at one point, I got a call from my manager saying one of my properties was burning down. I'll call you back. And I'm like, fuck, do I have insurance in place, was my first thought. And my insurance was legitimately due to expire in 9 days.
Wow.
So after that, I went and got an insurance broker that sets all of my insurances up now, so that even if I miss a payment, I've got the insurance locked in place for the 30 days after that payment date, and I've got security, and he's following me up each year because he's getting paid by the insurance company to do it. I, absolutely bombed decisions on soliciting. Like, I wasn't doing flood searches back in the day. I wasn't looking for final building approvals. I wasn't looking for things like easements or housing commissions or bushfire overlays or landslide overlays. And I've turned those things into a process so that when I go into bat, I know what I'm batting for, and I've got that baseline level of confidence. And where I'm at now is I want to share this information with you guys so that you can smash it, so that you can do it so much better. And like you, bro, like, you've learned from those experiences that I had. Every one of your properties is absolutely spot on, and you've saved yourself 10 years of pain that I went through. And so you're going to get there so much faster. And it's not just like, well, what's the plan and what's the idea, but what market and for what reasons and for what suburb for what reasons and for what property and for what reasons. And then the team of advisors that is just transformative when you've got the right people around you. And it's like, sharing all of that stuff with people is the exciting bit, and then paying this forward so that more people end up with choices in 5, 10, 15 years because of the work we're doing today. And people don't lose money, because I heard this crazy thing from the ABS recently. 60% of investors in Australia in the last 100 years have lost money in the first 5 years.
Wow.
And that's because 60% of people myself included, don't have a process, don't have a rule book to follow. They don't know that selling a property in the first 5 years, even though you've made 100K, with entry costs, holding costs and exit costs, looks like a big fat zero, you know what I mean? And this is what we want to pay it forward with.
Thanks so much for sharing that, bro. It's good to hear you open up a little bit about your personal situation and your journey. I know it's rare for the channel, but super exciting, and I'm just really excited to push forward and you know, continue helping people, but just continue learning, because what we've realized is the only constant is change, right? There's, you know, what existed yesterday may not exist today, and what exists today may not exist tomorrow. So you just constantly you got to constantly be on your toes, constantly be reading all of these different opinions and analyzing the different markets and taking that action as well. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
You know, I completely agree, man. Like 2 weeks ago, I got a tip from my mortgage broker saying, your rates look a little bit high. I think you should call the bank. I called the bank, and that one conversation, which was 45 minutes, saved me $12,000 this year.
Wow.
12 grand next year, 12 grand the year after, like a $36,000 45-minute call. That's like being on top of it and constantly learning and not sitting on your laurels. And then I called my property manager because it's the start of the year, and I said, where are we at with each of these properties? I went through all of my investments and all of my granny flats, and she said, well, we're at this point. And I said, where can we get to this year? And we made a plan. That one conversation has just increased my rent return by $32,000 this year. Alone, one conversation. I was literally on the phone with her for 15 minutes and sent her a follow-up email and text message to confirm the plan. She's put that into the system. So instead of her going, hey, Ben, you didn't know that your place was up for renewal in October, but I've just increased the rent by $20. She's like, in October on these 3 properties, we can increase them all by $100 to $150 a week. She's like, you've just got to wait till that point. Now, that is another conversation. I didn't know to do that at any point for the last 10 years. It's something that I've just started to do. And like, what if you have 3 properties and every time you talk to your broker, it's a $10,000 call, because it's like, instead of them saying this is broken, you know, we're talking about future, we're talking about strategy, we're talking about the market so I can make a better decision. Friday night last week, I literally watched 3 hours of Fred Harrison and Phil Anderson tapes, went back and looked at the last 3 real estate cycles from a stock market and a property perspective: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth. And I now have a very accurate picture of the next 10 years, exactly what I'm going to do with my personal investments moving forward. Like, I went back through everything that I'd been sent since the start of the year from all of my clients and all of our channels, and spent another 3 hours reading every single thing possible about the market, the war, the stock market, to just wrap my head around it. Now, I don't have to do any of this stuff anymore, but I do it because I'm obsessed, and I do it because, for exactly what you said, we're trying to get better, and we've got people's lives and livelihoods at stake in what we do, and we want to be the best for them. Now, not everyone has to be like that, but if you want to create financial freedom over a 10, 15, 20-year period, as opposed to working for 50, it is good to have an idea. It is good to have a great team. It is good to have a strategy. It is good to save a little bit more than you spend, and it is good to slowly invest that money in the right assets at the right time. And that's what we want to get through.
Woo! That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting cool, bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that. So nice, eh? Oh.